Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle interview de notre format Super Friends, cette émission dans laquelle on va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la pop culture et la culture comics par leur travail. On a le plaisir d'être sur le salon Facts pour l'édition 2026 et on aura dans cette émission l'honneur immense d'avoir Gary Frank avec nous, dessinateur illustre de nombreux titres chez Marvel, DC et maintenant qui fait tout un parcours en creator-owned avec Geiger sur le label Ghost Machine qu'il a co-créé avec Geoff Johns. Donc on va parler de comics avec lui. Le générique se lance, puis on se retrouve en anglais avec Gary. So hello, it's really nice to have you here, Gary. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you.
So this is the first time we speak together, so I have to go back a little bit with very basic questions at the beginning. So how would you introduce yourself today as someone that who might not know who you are and what your work is?
Okay, I guess I would probably at this point in my career be considered a veteran of the industry. I've been around for a long time. I've done stuff for Marvel, DC, a few other companies, and now I'm working on a project called Geiger for a relatively young company called Ghost Machine.
That's quite the summary.
Okay.
See, if we can go back really to the beginnings, well, before you were an artist, were you a reader of comics? Was it a medium that attracted you?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with comics. It was the American comics. I didn't really read much in terms of the British comics, even though probably from my accent you can hear I'm British. When I was a kid, I would go to visit my grandmother like every week, every 2 weeks, and there was a shop nearby where they sold American comics, but they weren't kind of like imported in a way where you kind of could follow a story from comic to comic. They were quite random. They would because comics used to be used as ballast for ships that would come back across the Atlantic. So the comic shops couldn't order specific titles. So it was really a kind of a lucky dip whenever you would go to the shop, whether you would find something that you wanted or whether it would still be the same comics kind of sat there that were there the previous month. And but still, I mean, I just kind of that was the point where, I mean, it just seemed all from so far away. America was so exotic, and these weird cartoons and weird characters leaping around places like New York, which I didn't think I'd ever see, let alone actually be involved in creating those types of comics at some point in my future. But yeah, as a kid, I just enjoyed the hell out of them.
And even so, you couldn't follow a comic series. You were not disgusted to not be allowing to follow a continuity, because it seems really a matter that is important today, but it didn't.
Well, I was a kid, and I mean, I know everybody kind of gets hung up on that stuff now and continuity and everything, but I mean, I just enjoyed the craziness of the stories. Occasionally. I discovered at some point that Marvel UK was reprinting American comics, and so you could kind of like follow that. Marvel did Spider-Man Weekly. Marvel UK did Spider-Man Weekly, which was a black and white version of whatever had probably been published in America maybe 10 years before, and also the original X-Men, the old Jack Kirby era, the original series, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So I followed those on a weekly basis. But in terms of getting the actual, the in quotation marks, real comics, the actual real American ones, it was there was no way you could kind of like guarantee that you could follow a story from one to another. Occasionally it would happen out of luck. But I used to find myself drawn to comics which had self-contained stories like What If or Marvel Team Up, where it was an entire story in an issue. So yeah, that was my favorite stuff. If there was a nice What If, that was a great day.
And do you remember at what point you decided you wouldn't be only reading comics but also making them?
Well, it occurred to me because when I was a kid, I was pretty good at drawing, and it was an idea that one day I would like to. But it was such a fantastic thing, and it was a kid's dream. And at some point, you grow up and you become more realistic about what is available to young kid growing up on a housing estate outside Bristol, and that just didn't really seem possible. So I kind of left comics and drifted away, and then it was after I left school and I really didn't know what else to do, and I started picking up comics again. And that was when I got in touch with Marvel UK in London, and I would send portfolio work to them, and it was quite a long process. In hindsight, it was a couple of years, but I always kind of had the feeling that one day I would break in at that point. In hindsight, I realized that was a lot of misplaced optimism. Well, maybe not misplaced in the end, but certainly it should have been misplaced optimism, because it's a lot more difficult than it seemed. But everything just kind of started falling into place at some point.
And what was the most difficult part or the most challenging part of so-called breaking into the industry?
I don't know if it was. I mean,
maybe you don't consider it. Maybe it's not
at the time it didn't. At the time, it didn't. As I said, it didn't seem so difficult, because when you're young and you don't really have your ego is a little out of control. You think you're much better at doing the things than you are. You think, oh, okay, I'm just going to do this now. The world's my oyster. And at that point I was drawing and I was looking at what was on the markets, and I was thinking, hey, my stuff's as good as that. In hindsight, no, I look back and it was nowhere near as good as what was being published by a lot of other people at the time. But that arrogance and that overconfidence of youth kind of, that sustained me. I was just always convinced that I was just, the break was just around the corner. If I look back at the stuff I was doing at that time, the break was miles away, because my stuff was just nowhere near good enough. But at the time, I didn't really know that. So to answer your question as to what kind of sustained me, it was a mixture of arrogance and ignorance.
And what do you, because like you said in the introduction, you consider yourself as a veteran of comics. So what do you take from all those years doing superhero comics for both Marvel and DC? What would be like, if you had to summarize a little bit, what would be your take on that experience?
Well, superheroes are very different now to any of those points which I've just described in my life. When I was a kid, it was a very, very niche thing. As I said, I was in England. There was only one other kid that I knew that read American comics in my school. When I came back, my second visit to comic enthusiasm, superheroes were still quite niche. It was considered something that it was almost embarrassing. It was a nerdy pursuit. Now, obviously, the world has changed. Superheroes are very mainstream thanks to the movies and pop culture. So, I don't know. I think probably the fact that superheroes represent different things to the things they did. I don't know whether I'm not going to make a judgment call on it, but it just felt that, I don't know, that kind of the call to the nerd, to the really, really passionate of the people that are kind of like digging out and discovering these things is different now to the people that are attracted maybe to the genre, who maybe don't even read comics, but they like superheroes because they like superhero films. So I guess from that point of view, it's changed the whole concept, the whole genre of superheroes. As regards how what it means to me, it doesn't really change, because I was always they never changed to me. It was never a different thing to me. I think superheroes informed a lot of my character as I grew up as well. I was kind of like taking moral lessons from Spider-Man. I was reading those things and I was thinking, yeah, it is unfair when this happens, or yes, somebody should do something about this. I don't know if you necessarily get that if you're, building models or playing football, but comics in those days were there were a lot of moral lessons and a lot of moral stories going on in them as well. And I kind of think that it's important, I think. I don't know whether the fact that we are where we are today is due to a lack of that stuff, or whether it's just because the things changed. But yeah, no, I felt they were a positive thing. They were always a positive thing.
And one thing that might be striking today is that there are still people doing comics, and I love comics as a medium, and I thank you for being there doing comics. But what's the appeal to you as a form of art? Why is, let's say, comics is a superior medium?
I mean, I could talk about somebody. I don't know who it was, but somebody said something about if Shakespeare and Michelangelo collaborated on a project, it would be a comic, because it's that fusion of images and text. But I don't know. I mean, it offers me a lot of freedom in that you don't really have to worry about things like special effects budgets. You don't have to worry too much about oversight from a company. I mean, certainly now that I'm in a company which is publishing creator-owned things. But I like the fact that you're not really limited in terms of what you can, the type of story that you want to tell. You can make things as fantastical as you want. There is no budget. It costs the same for me to draw a cup of tea as it takes for me to draw a world exploding. So from that, it kind of opens up a lot of interesting avenues in which to take stories. This is always fun, but I think also the way that the satisfaction that I get it within comics is different now. Maybe in terms of creating the comics, it's different now to what it was originally. I take much more. When you're young, you're learning the whole craft, and a lot of that is drawing and draftsmanship and things like that. As you get older, pushing that becomes harder and harder. The progress you can make becomes more and more difficult. So you find other things to sustain your enthusiasm and your interest. And for me, the storytelling aspect is everything. So often people ask me, if you could draw any superhero, what would it be? And my answer is generally, it really doesn't matter, because after 2 or 3 pages of drawing a superhero, you've got it out of your system. It doesn't, even if it's your favorite character, that's not going to keep you interested. What keeps you interested is the story. So if you can find somebody, as I've found in Geoff, a collaborative partner who will give me stories, the kind of stories that I like to tell, then that's where all the satisfaction can come from. Just that challenge of taking a great story and finding a way to break it down into visual images and just try to find the smoothest and most resistant-free mode of getting that story into somebody's head. Nothing which can disturb that process. You don't want, in my opinion, I mean, my personal philosophy is you don't want anything which calls attention to the art if you can possibly avoid it. Maybe if somebody wants to come back and look at the book afterwards, sure, you want them to see nice pictures. But the important thing is when somebody's in the act of reading the comic, it needs to be seamless. The story just needs to slip into the mind. So anything which can disturb that process, like a flashy, self-indulgent layout, or some crazy over-detailed image which somebody needs to pore over for 20 minutes in order to pick out, what the details that they need. All of those, for me, they're working against the storytelling. So everything has to be simply delivered. Just the way of getting that story as easily into the reader's head as possible.
All right. You mentioned Geoff, so let's get back a little bit into your relationship. How did you guys meet, and at what point did you know that he was going to be the longest creative partner you would have?
Well, at first we just did a couple of issues of Avengers.
Yeah, Avengers.
And it was just a little fill-in arc in a broader group of books. And I just thought, this is good. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed doing Avengers. I've got to work with this cool new writer. And I thought that was it. And then I would move on and do something else, as I always did, kind of like jumping around from project to project, writer to writer. But Geoff went to DC. I was still contracted at Marvel. And then he kept getting in touch with me and saying, is your contract run out? Is your contract run out? And when it did, we went and we did Superman together, and it was great. We just clicked creatively. And at the end of that, instead of me thinking, well, what am I going to do next? It was, hey, what are we going to do next? So, and it just didn't stop from that. And that's, over 20 years now, we've just been saying, okay, what are we going to do next? It doesn't really occur to me now to try to find a story independent of Geoff. We work together, and that's that.
And is it like just a way of really working together, like the getting the scripts, and the scripts are perfectly written for you?
It's partly that, but it's also. I mean, we're good friends. Obviously, at this point, I don't think you can kind of work with somebody that long if you don't get on. But I think he's telling the stories which I enjoy drawing. He's telling stories which are about emotions and about characters on an emotional level interacting. It's not all just spectacular fight scenes or exploding spaceships. The stories are very, very human, and I kind of respond to that as a reader, and for me that means also that's where the enjoyment comes as an artist, especially if you're kind of a storytelling oriented artist, which sounds a weird thing to say in a storytelling medium, but not everybody has kind of like the same passion in terms of what they want to achieve in that medium. For me, it's great storytelling, and great storytelling. You get dragged in easier when you kind of feel these characters, you feel their emotions, and you feel them on a human level. And so, we just work together because we're both trying to tell the same type of story.
I just want to go back a little bit on Doomsday Clock because I asked Geoff that question. Was it like, did you feel like any pressure on doing a sort of sequel to something as huge as Watchmen? And because you had also because you kind of like not mimicking, but getting also onto what Dave Gibbons did at that time with the 9-panel grids and stuff like that. Like, so was it? Yeah. Did you feel a pressure?
At first, no pressure because I refused to be involved. I just, for me, Watchmen is the greatest comic, greatest superhero comic, and so the idea of getting involved with some kind of a sequel to that, I was immediately no. It doesn't. That's not a project which needs to be done. Mixing it with DC Comics characters just felt wrong on lots of levels. So Geoff kind of like said, okay, all right. And then he went away. And then a few months later, he would come back and he'd say, hey, I've thought of this take on this. And I'd be saying, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, it sounds like fun, but it's not for me. And then at some point, like months went past and he bombarded me with enough kind of ideas of how this project was shaping up in his mind. But at a certain point, I just, that does sound like fun. Okay, all right, I'm in. And yeah, I didn't regret it at all. I'm hugely proud of what we achieved. I mean, it's inevitable, I guess, that people are going to say, oh, do you think, how do you compare to Watchmen? But I don't really, I mean, like I said, greatest superhero comic of all time. I'm not even thinking of that. It's not so much an homage, but it's almost like a response. I love Watchmen, but I don't much like the effect that Watchmen had on every other comic which was being produced, every other superhero comic which was produced afterwards. And I think Geoff kind of felt the same way because Watchmen was a great standalone piece. And it didn't mean that every other superhero comic had to be seen through a Watchmen-like lens, a kind of a gritty, ultra deconstructed, down-to-earth, cerebral way. Sometimes comics can just be fun. The old-fashioned comics can just be fun. And so I think what Doomsday Clock was almost like a kind of a response to what Watchmen had done to comics. To say, these characters are great. They're all great. But so were the characters that existed before Watchmen in the way that they existed before Watchmen. Superman obviously being the where it all started, the greatest superhero of them all, and just a way of kind of saying that character is still relevant, and those types of superheroes are still relevant as well. It was just kind of a way of sort of bookending the effect of Watchmen.
And in technical terms, what were the reasons? Because there were long breaks between issues. Was it just because you hadn't done too many pages in advance and you were just
I think we just we underestimated the amount of time that we that would be required for something like this. Well, the deadlines got longer. Geoff had some other stuff going on. The books were so ref heavy. I mean, Geoff would say, "Oh, we've got a page here," and he would like come up with like 15 obscure DC heroes from, like from the 60s or the 50s, and even at editorial in DC, you'd say, "Can you send me reference for this character?" And they'd say, "Well, this is what I find." And they were like using Google Image, but Geoff has this encyclopedic knowledge of all of these old characters. Yeah. But it was hard. It was a long time kind of getting little bits and piecing together, and not just each character, but the version of character which needed to be, because they change as well through time, and trying to find the appropriate version of each character to draw. Yeah, it was just a long, hard process.
Let's get to Geiger and Ghost Machine. Geiger was first published as a 6-issue miniseries, and then there was the whole announcement of what Ghost Machine would be, to create our own publishing label, and you have stakes in it. Could you explain us a little bit, how it came to be?
Yeah, well, originally it was just a simple create our own comic image, and we had our own imprint, and we thought we might sort of do some other characters, and after the Geiger miniseries we did the Junkyard Joe miniseries, and those were kind of like the first bits. But in the meantime we were just like kind of talking to people. I know Geoff had some other ideas of stories he wanted to do with some other artists, and we kind of Geoff was talking to some other people as well who were kind of like involved in the business, and slowly the thing kind of grew into the idea of a new type of comic company rather than it just being an imprint. So yeah, as you point out, we all own stakes in the company. We all own a part of the company, and it's kind of it's a cooperative. The layout is kind of like a cooperative. If one of our books does really, really well, and maybe becomes a TV series or something, everything goes into the pot. Every creator shares. So yeah, from that point of view, it's kind of revolutionary. There's not that pressure on everybody to say, try to find the most marketable character or the most marketable concept. It doesn't matter to us. We can kind of like tick along and then hope that one of the books at some point will do well enough that it kind of like, helps everybody stay sustainable, helps all of the other books remain sustainable. So from that point of view, it lifts kind of some of the pressure, which the industry now has changed so much. Everybody's kind of like looking at what you can kind of, how much money you can make, how sustainable an individual comic is. And when you combine all of the things like the costs of producing a comic now, the fact that the numbers that you sell are so much lower than they would have been years ago, and also what the public generally requires in terms of like the level of detail in a page, the quality of the colors, the equation, the calculation of how much money you need to make off a comic in order for a comic to be sustainable is always slanting further and further against the creation of more comics. But if we can find some way of not saying, well, we'll make a comic, but it has to make a movie. We'll make a comic, but it has to be also adaptable for a TV series. It gives us a kind of a bit of a creative freedom to be able to say, we just make this good comic, and all it ever needs to really be is a comic. But if another one of our comics within the Ghost Machine stable does become a movie or does become a TV series, that helps to feed everybody else, and it helps to keep the whole thing sustainable.
How did you work the whole world building of Geiger with Geoff? Because maybe even when you did the first miniseries, like a lot of characters that will come after were already created, or did you go as far as you launched the second ongoing series?
Geiger was, excuse the pun, Geiger was ground zero for it all. So we just started out with a few characters, and then as we moved through that first miniseries, we kind of fleshed it out and some more characters came around. I don't even know with Junkyard Joe, who featured in that first series, I don't even know at the time whether we kind of had the idea that we would make him another character with it, you know, a recurring character within the universe. I think we just kind of liked him, and so he just kind of stuck around. But the funny thing is he almost takes on a life of its own. So the more comics we do set in that universe, and the more characters we create, the more it kind of feels like it's all real, and they're all out there somewhere. They sort of more logically suggest themselves, the characters. It's hard to explain, but when a new character comes in, you're going to think it feels almost like, yeah, he was always there, because we know the universe now. We know it so well, and we know the kind of people that populate it. So yeah, it feels like it just feels like we're just continually just discovering ingredients in this soup that we're making at the same time, rather than putting the stuff in ourselves. It's like something bobs to the surface and we say, hey, yeah, there we go, there's a character for our next story. It's hard to explain, but it's taken on a life of its own.
And how do you work with also the other artists that are doing the fill-ins? Do you give them directions with Geoff?
No, from my point of view, I'm basically, when we have a fill-in artist, I'm concentrating on catching up to get far enough ahead that I can come back in. So once there's another artist in there and they're doing stuff, I'm basically out of it for a while. Geoff deals with them, and Brian, the editor. And then, I can see what's happening. I can see what's coming in, because we have our site where, as the pages come in, I can kind of like check in on progress. But my main thing is just getting my head down, getting my own book done, and then waiting for the time when my stuff gets published again.
And do you also have a lot of discussions forth and back with Geoff as far as where the story goes? Because it started as just a journey in a post-apocalyptic world. Now we're going through time travel also.
Yeah.
I was wondering how.
We've talked about. We talk about everything, you know, to do with the book. Also, Geoff, because I know Geoff works very, very collaboratively with Brian as well on Redcoat, the other character which is currently published in the Unnamed universe. So they've got this whole thing running alongside, and Geoff's kind of knitting it together. I don't know how much Brian knows about what my conversations are with Geoff. I don't know much about what Geoff's conversations are with Brian until I see the stuff on the page. But Geoff is kind of like, Geoff's juggling the balls and keeping them all in the air and dealing with the various books and knitting them all together.
But do you have an ending in sight, or are you just going to keep going on?
I know Redcoat has they have a fixed end that they're working towards. With Geiger, we have a possible end, and then also a possible way to kind of return to the universe as well. But I don't think ours is quite so set in stone. But we have like a kind of a broad idea of what the whole point of Geiger is, where we want the character to be at the point where he kind of feels fully formed. There's a progression with the character. There is an end state that we want to take him to.
Because what's quite impressive is that like we are right now past 20 issues, which is not that something that happens that often right now in the indie comics industry. Yeah. And it's quite exciting to see that you can go on for even almost 30 issues if we are taking into account the first mini-series. So that's why I'm also wondering how.
Yeah, well, I'm on it. I'm penciling or doing the art at the moment on issue 24 of the regular series. We also had 2 issues of Ground Zero, then the 6-issue mini-series, plus Junkyard Joe, which is kind of linked. It's all part of the same universe. So yeah, we've been immersed in this kind of world for a long time now. I think we're just, at the moment, we're on the 5th anniversary. We've just celebrated the 5th anniversary of Geiger, the first issue of Geiger. So yeah, it's quite mind-blowing when you kind of you look back and you think about how much work we've put into this thing already, and it still feels quite, I don't know, it still feels like we're kind of at the beginning of it. But I tell you what really kind of brought stuff home to me was recently we did a series of guidebooks for all of the Ghost Machine universes. And so I was doing these covers and doing all of the various the characters which are appearing not only in my book, but also the other unnamed books, and also the other books in the Ghost Machine, under the Ghost Machine umbrella. And it's just a colossal universe. It's just already there. The quantity of just great character stuff that is already there. It's just incredible.
It really feels to me also that you might correct me if I'm mistaken, that I think the Ghost Machine has quite a success in the United States. And it really feels to me that even though Peter J. Tomasi and Geoff Johns are really incredible writers, the series also have a success because of you, of the artists. And it feels like some kind of return to the beginnings of Image Comics, when the artists were the driving forces of comic books. Do you agree with that or not?
I don't know. I think we're more story based than image, right? But I mean, we're aware that none of what we're doing now would be possible if it hadn't been for that event all of those years ago, where the image guys went off and did their own thing. But I think we are maybe more story first rather than art first. Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that the artists which are involved have been chosen because of the fact that they're storytelling oriented artists rather than splash artists or those kind of artists. I think that kind of speaks to the idea that what we're really looking to do here is create stories and a functioning universe rather than rather than kind of like this kind of the image zeitgeist, which was art, splashy pages and everything. I'm not saying that those guys weren't good storytellers as well, because they were, but that was what people were looking for.
From time to time. To splash, to page also.
I've got no problem with splashes, but you need to know why you're using it.
Yeah.
There needs to be a reason to use it.
It has to be effective to the story.
Yeah, it has to be, because it's a tool. It's a tool in the arsenal. Everything is. When you use everything which is available to you to help tell the story that in the most effective way possible. But you remember that era. I don't know. Maybe you're a little younger than me, but that era there were a lot of books where it was just kind of out 22 pages. 5 of them would be splashes, and everything else would be like a splash panel with two small inset panels. And the storytelling was not considered to be of the utmost importance.
All right, and I think that might be a very too obvious question, but are there any plans of doing a Geiger in another media? Let's say TV
we're talking
series
about
or
it. There's the possibility. Nothing's firm yet. We did originally have an agreement with Paramount to develop something, but then Paramount got taken over by another company, and the people that we were talking to all moved on, so that kind of just like fell by the wayside. So we just kind of got our heads down, carried on with the comic, and if something happens, it happens. If it happens with Geiger, or if it happens with Redcoat, or if it happens with Rockefellers, or any of the other books, everything, it's all good.
All right, and you keep on doing comics until the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Gary.
Thank you.